All right, we are back with another episode of Mining Now. We've had some great guests on today. And as many of you know, I have the background of the equipment world, so I always like when we get hardware, equipment, anything in that vein, I get excited about. And today we have Polydeck on. We've got John Griffith. He is a project manager, and Perry Miller. He is consulting on the mining group side. And Perry, you've been in with the company a long time, I believe, right?
35 years.
35 years?
So 12 years before that with a different company, but still doing screening and
yeah. So so we're going to be covering it. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Good to have you on. Let's start with let's start with you, John.
Yes.
Can you give us that snapshot of who Polydeck is for anybody who doesn't know?
Polydeck is a world-class leader in the manufacture and design of synthetic screen media for your vibratory screening devices and or trommels within your milling circuits for the iron ore, gold, copper mines. So our footprint is unique as far as 1x1s for the polyurethane and 1x2s for the rubber panels. But our systems we designed to maximize open area to optimize efficiency of the screening devices that the customer is using based on application.
Right. You said you're 35 years and then 12 years. Sorry, before where?
Well, I worked for a vibrating screen manufacturer.
Oh, okay. There's a lot on your website in these notes that my producers will send me notes, and there's a lot about pushing innovation, but really from the customer side of collecting what the customers need. What has sort of been the evolution? You'd have that perspective, 35 years, things do change. Some things also say the same. Can you give the what's the same, what's changed?
Initially, everything centered around the comminution. You would crush, screen, mill, screen, whatever. And all of the screens were equipped with wire.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the most sophisticated things that they had. There may have been in scalping applications, you might have used plate, but that was about it. Somewhere along the way, somebody figured out that a synthetic would wear longer. And for many, many years, people made synthetic products for screening. Probably the biggest difference in what Polydeck did was to make a modular system. And in that modular system, you could replace only the worn part.
A modular system being the screen into...
In other words, you have your screening media, which could be say a wire cloth that was clamping from side to side. But if you got a hole in that piece, you would lose 24, 32 square feet, 40 square feet. And the idea behind a modular system was you only had to replace the part that was worn. But you need a system for that module to fit on.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the expertise as to what Polydeck does is they've designed systems to go on original equipment manufacturers' equipment in order to plug these modules on.
Right. So you're not, it's not one manufacturer that you can work with. It's across the board.
That's correct.
Completely across the board. And we try not to have any affiliations with any particular one vibrating screen manufacturer or milling manufacturer as it pertains to, say, a trommel, but work with all of them. And initially, all our work was done in situ. We went out and we did things that were already in the field. As the product grew and our expertise grew, we had the opportunity to work with original equipment manufacturers and gain that front end alignment where you have a perfect match between screen and system.
Mm-hmm. I want to get into that system a little bit more, but I also wanted, what's a typical conversation? Well, who's the customer? Is it the operators or is it the manufacturers typically for you?
It's both.
It's both. Oh, okay.
So we work with the EPCMs that's doing the design work up front for, a mine expansion or a mill expansion. And we will get with them. We'll help them we try to come alongside them to assist them in sizing the machines that they need for their specific application and using our media. Okay. Because today, any of these large mines are not going to use wire cloth. Wire cloth is primarily used in aggregate soft ore applications today. So we will work with them to maintain us being spec'd in, okay, for their application, and then it'll come out for bid, and then we'll bid to them, and we compete with the others that's within the marketplace. But also with the once it's decided that they're going to go with the particular screen and our panels and so forth, we follow up with the end user as far as making sure setting up proper inventory levels at their mine site and site visits to assess how the circuit is going. We'll be there for commissioning to make sure that there's if there's any issues with the screen media.
So you're very hands-on.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You have to be, because things change.
That's right.
No matter what they say it is going in, sometimes it's a little different 2 months into a runtime, or a year, or 10 years. And nobody runs their equipment to the level as to when it was sold.
Right.
They always run more.
They want more through it.
And I might mention something else. Our initial focus was to do in situ things that were already in the field. And in those days.
Oh, that was the initial focus.
That's right. Yes.
In those days.
Okay.
Everything was geared toward the maintenance end, and you wanted things to last longer. And yes, synthetic materials do last longer. So that made common sense. However, you can reach a point where you've got so much mass within the screen that it's not doing the same work.
Mm.
And so one of the best things about our product is that we can offer the equivalent of what they were getting with wire, or slightly less. But we know the tons per hour per square foot for all those applications. So if we're given the proper information up front, there's a gradation, then we can come in and say, you need a panel with this much open area, with this size aperture, and it will make this separation for this period of time. And that gives them the ability to plan their maintenance around that.
Right.
Let's talk about our heavy industry tour brought to you by Savannah Equipment, supplying mining equipment worldwide. We are heading to events across North America, Africa, and Australia, and filming episodes on location. Email us at info@crownsmen.com to be part of our Crownsmen's Heavy Industry World Tour. Your trusted partner of choice, Bestech Engineering, is excited to announce that they have acquired Spencer Engineering. This allows Bestech to add mine hoist expertise to their existing suite of services, including mining, power, electrical, instrumentation and automation, mechanical, and structural divisions. This diversification will offer clients the highest level of service and value for their projects. Don't miss out on this exciting new chapter of engineering excellence. Reach out today at besttech@besttech.com to learn how Bestech can help you. SafeSite has developed a suite of innovative technologies focused on step-change improvements that impacts vertical mining, shaft measurement, underground mapping and survey, mine rescue, and emergency response underground. SafeSite solutions introduce new possibilities in approach and efficiency while keeping every site safer. SafeSite solutions deliver valuable data that can quickly be turned into actionable decision data that allows effective and safe operation. Digital guide alignment will reduce shaft maintenance costs, underground mapping drone technology that removes shadows for 100% accurate reconciliation, and mine rescue drones that extend the reach and range of responders on surface and underground. Visit safesitexp.com for more info. Okay, so let's give a special thank you to one of our longest sponsors of the show, Savannah Equipment. And I'm actually going to hand it over to Jared so that he can give you a little bit more info on Savannah Equipment.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, people see them as sponsors, so they'll ask me, kind of who they are, what they are, and just trying to understand the scope of the company. So Savannah Equipment is a mining supply company, and they're delivering on the whole equipment supply chain. So everything from the ore processing to underground mining, open pit. They're in hard rock and placer operations. And what they're doing is they're sourcing equipment from all over the world and then delivering it all over the world. Now, they are a Canadian company, so they're based there. But, let's say, they're selling entire ore processing plants. So there might be a plant down in Latin America, and there's a new mine that needs that plant in Africa or somewhere in the U.S. So they're facilitating that entire transactions. But they're also delivering, an individual conveyor or a concentrator or a pump package or just an electrical package. So it really is the whole gambit of the mining equipment supply chain.
Oh, that's great then. Well, then you definitely have to check them out. If you're looking for mining equipment, visit them at savannahEquipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day.
Is the system consistent across the board, or you... Actually, maybe can you explain the system a little bit more and how it integrates into them? Maybe more from a technical aspect. We can, if you can send us some visuals, we can bring that up on the screen just so the audience can see exactly what this is.
The system that Perry's referring to, our screen medium, modularity and so forth, combined with our pipe top stringer system, maximizes the amount of open area. In other words, the borders on the panels are narrowed down, okay, to match the stringers that's supporting those, because you have to have a platform for the panels to support,
Right, a physical platform.
That's
for it.
exactly
Yeah.
right. So that spans 1 foot. All right. And these are called stringers. And different manufacturers will use, whether it be large deck angles that are wide, and they will partially occlude some of the modular media's openings if they're too big. So our system, high top 2 stringer system with our screen panels, maximizes the open area that we can provide them on the panel itself.
Yeah.
So another great thing about this, to eliminate segregation on the screen, is that when we put that system in, it converts that crown deck, that it's tension, it's got over the bucker bars and so forth. We're making it a flat deck. So when material comes into the feed end, it comes off the feed shelf, it spreads out homogeneously across the screen. And that is one of the steps to make sure that you have good, efficient separation on a screen, is that you have a good, even flow spread across the width of the screen, not feed favoring one side or the other or the center.
Which is that's an old problem in the feeding system.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I remember, again, I pulled out some of those like wire ones, and inevitably there was always a section that you could tell it was the problem area. So how much of that is switching out? Can you eliminate it completely, though, that there's just the way they set up their equipment, there's always going to be that spot that gets the most feed?
I'll give you an example. Okay, let's say that you don't have an even feed coming into the screen. Most modern screens today, wide body units and so forth, have a feed box that the feed is falling into, whether it's coming facing it, coming from the rear. But if it's coming in at its side, this is what we see most commonly, all right, especially if it's coming out of the mill, all right, it will be thrown because of the rotation, thrown to one side. If that feed box is not designed correctly to even that out, you'll have a hot side to that screen. Most of your material and slurries favoring one side. Well, to correct that, if you can't correct it in the feed chute that's coming to it,
which is ultimately what you want to do.
That's what you want to do.
Right.
But if you can't, what we will sometimes do is put deflectors, okay, of thicker material. We know it's going to take a beating, but to deflect the material over, to spread it out, so the screen and the apertures that are following that have an opportunity to pass that material. So we can manipulate the feed bed somewhat. It's imperfect, but we can.
But it's all little percentages of improvement along the whole process.
Exactly.
Which is also the reason why we have field people to go out and make sure that everything is operating correctly.
Yeah.
And if it's not, all of our people are trained to do just what he said, is to put in the proper deflectors, dams, solid panels, heavier panels in those areas where they're required, and keep the modularity there, but also keep it cost effective and make sure you're doing something in a very efficient way.
Because the modularity allows you to swap out different.
And we can do that. Let's say that we've got based on the size analysis, we've got some near size material, high percentage of near size material close to the separation cut that the customer wants to make. All right. So at the discharge end of that deck, we want to try to clean some of that up and capture it. We might come slightly off of the aperture that we're using on the upper end of the deck to be able to pass or reject some of that material to clean that up off the tail end of the deck.
Right.
But share with him about, we don't have to mention no names, but to share with him about, we was talking about segregation and feed, how this one arrangement is, you helped design a chute to feed those two secondary classifications.
Well, being around screens for 47 years, you've seen a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen more bad things than I have seen good things. But not all of that is going to be bad if you know how to adjust the flows correctly with the equipment that they have. Now, if there's enough elevation between where the material is entering and onto the deck, we've actually been able to put manifolds, been able to put 1 or 2 stage sieves in front of screens, which will not only help with the screening, but homogenize and make a nice even feed across the deck.
Yeah.
And we use Polydeck screens panels, solid panels, and sizing panels in those vessels also. So all of this is site specific. And if you're sitting in an office, you're never going to know what happens. And unfortunately today, in an effort to be efficient, sometimes original equipment manufacturers, that somebody that has said, okay, you need a 12 by 30 horizontal deck to do this work. They never get out to see how it actually did work or didn't work. That's why we go. That's why even if it's original equipment, we're going to be there for startup. We're going to be there on a periodic basis in order to make sure that it stays effective, it stays efficient. And without that, things change.
Yeah.
Things change. And different people come in and maintain something differently, and they
well, we talk a lot about turnover in the mining industry. You might go there a year later, and the crew of 10, it's a different crew.
That's right.
And no matter how much you try and document how it should run, it gets put in a file. Nobody brings it back out. So it's real important for all of our people to know what's appropriate to do under certain circumstances, and to go out and make sure it stays in those circumstances that we set it up to do.
We were talking about changing. I'm going to say this wrong, but be able to basically adjust the modules to where maybe it's loading up on one part of the feed, and that's an example for me though of over this 35 years. Was that always part of the system, or has the implementation of that been able to evolve a lot?
Well, both like anything else, both of those are true. In the older times, most of the uses was for a cost-effective basis.
Right.
And as a cost-effective basis, we kept getting big margins and they lasted longer. But what we found...
You mean from your operation side or from the customers?
Both.
Both, okay.
And that was their mindset. And because most of it was put in the field after a vibrating screen installation was already there,
right?
They wanted it because they were changing that wire cloth out too often. It's taken too many people to do it, too many man hours to do it. And
those things were awful to work with.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, when you get a hole, you're going to pollute either the underflow or the overflow.
Yeah.
Depending on where it's at. And the whole thing just needed to be changed to something more sophisticated. We provided that sophistication. However, the thought was, let's just make it last forever. Well, nothing lasts forever. And if you have so few of openings that nothing goes through, then you're reducing the amount of screening effort that's going on. And that's always important also. So people tended to take it the wrong direction. They would keep getting lower and lower open area because it lasted longer.
Right.
But the metallurgical efficiency was
not there.
Declining.
Yeah.
So by making a system of rails that allows us to get the maximum amount of open area in a 1 foot or a 1 by 2 foot panel, we can control that. And it just take a 1/2 inch separation. We probably have 35 different panels, different dies that we would use of varying thicknesses, open areas, angle reliefs, and all of these things help in certain circumstances where you're trying to match a screen panel with the workload.
Yeah. I was curious about materials that you're using. Does that change per project? Well, is there a certain type of are the materials different? What's the framework inside? Is there some sort of frame inside that poly, or can you break down the actual materials used?
Yeah, I'll elaborate for you. I mean, we use a steel insert on different panels based on
like a skeleton kind
a
of
skeleton inside, if you will. That based on the application that's given in the aperture, that what size material is going to be hitting this. Okay.
Okay. So the steel, it's the frame itself changes.
The weight load that this panel is going to have to put under, that determines what size skeleton we put in it. All right.
Okay.
Usually polyurethane is used for wet applications. Not entirely, but for rule of thumb, polyurethane is used for wet applications and rubber for dry. Although I have several customers that use rubber, and we have special formulations to use for wet applications as well. So back to what Perry said was, everything is driven toward, especially in high-priced ores, copper, gold, all these other ores, and usually they're very abrasive. Okay, if you've got a mine that's running 100,000 tons, whatever per hour,
per day
rather. They want to stay continuously running. All right.
Yes.
Shutting down, it's a huge deal for them. It's huge money.
We just talked about it with another guest this morning. Yeah.
It's big. So the ideal situation is to run as long as you possibly can and coordinate the shutdown of key pieces of equipment at the same time. If you pull a major mill outage, you want to be able to pull maintenance
Right.
at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
All right. So kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. All right. Fix everything, then y'all fire back up for another run. So we have a fully funded and practicing R&D department that experiment with different formulations of our rubber compounds and our polyurethane compounds to maximize the life and durability of our screen panels for any given application.
Created and designed by industry leaders with decades of frontline experience, Sophie is a platform that brings workers home every day. Give your workforce the communication tools they need on the job to do it safely and productively. Visit Sophie.com today to discover how you can leverage Sophie to increase efficiencies, mitigate risk, and optimize collaboration. Safer, smarter, Sophie. With Fender Dunlop, you know you are getting the best conveyor belting in the market. That's because they ensure the integrity of their conveyor belting by monitoring each step of the manufacturing process in their North American facilities. Focused attention is given to each belting order to guarantee that they produce a belt that will assist the customer in reducing operation costs, maximizing uptime, and improving revenue. Visit FenderDunlopAmericas.com to learn more. North Isle's mission is to be Canada's leading sustainable resource company and is on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol NCX. North Isle owns the North Island Project, the most developable copper-gold project in Canada. The North Island Project has compelling project economics, is near infrastructure, has tremendous exploration upside, and has leading-edge Indigenous engagement and support from all levels of government. 2023 could be the biggest year yet. Learn more by visiting northisle.ca or by calling them at 778-638-2515 or emailing them at info@northisle.ca.
We talk about the trommels for a second.
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of a soft spot. My family sold a lot of them and that. So I saw a lot of the steel ones, like just pure steel.
That's right.
Sometimes it'd be, I think some, like the front end would be the larger holes. It would actually change sometimes. There's all these different configurations I saw over time.
Yeah.
So where do you come in on the trommel side? Could you expand on it a little bit?
We've been manufacturing trommels. When did we start? 1970? 1980?
Well,
Trommel screens or the full trommels?
Full trommels.
Full trommels.
This is one where we actually got started making them for original equipment manufacturers, and a lot of mills are designed from parts that are bought all over the world.
That's correct.
And so we wanted to get into that business, and people would come to us and say, "Can you do this?" Well, what you were seeing very often was a piece of plate that was rolled, welded, and had a spiral in it.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's not how we would do it. We actually have to have a series of flats that go around. You can do the same thing with a curved shape, but it's easier to use if you're going to do modular. And the whole purpose of it is to do it modular because you get longer wear life and you can replace exactly the spot that's worn. Or change the apertures, as you say, depending on how you're dropping out your material. That's what we got involved in. So we designed structures that we could put our system in, and those rails.
So it's kind of the reverse because the frame is on, you're sitting on top. Now you're doing a frame around and then that's going inside.
Then our panels on the inside.
Right.
And so we are actually doing it in situ now, which is it's interesting that it's gone in reverse for that product line. But, we can go in and replace those plate trommels.
Yeah. Is it the same system though? It's a modular system?
Yeah.
So okay. So it's all the same
It's all the
principle.
same.
Yeah.
All the same. And the beauty of it, that is if you're stocking panels for one size in one part of your mill, you may be using the same panel.
Right.
Most of the time, these mills are just to catch the scats or the ball chips.
That's right.
And so you're making half-inch separations, even though that everything falls through. It's not really a screening effort as much as it is a scalping out of little parts.
So it's a which?
A safety device.
It's a safety device so that your pumps underneath that are pulling slurries out of a slurry tank aren't contaminated with big chunks of steel from the balls or the rods or anything else that might get in there.
This might be a little bit of a silly question, but if you're still, I mean, I've seen the steel one, so I know they're still around. But do you still have conversations with, do you just still have to convince people to switch over to them, or do people kind of know now this is a more efficient way of operating? Is there still that discussion, or is it pretty?
I would say it depends on what market segment that you're pursuing.
Like size of operations and things?
How big the trommel is, what ore they're producing, okay? Or like limestone, okay, quarries and so forth, you would probably still see a lot of punch.
A lot of it has to do with the cost of the what you're screening.
That's exactly right.
If you're making gold, and gold's got a good price, they can spend a lot on whatever it is that they need to maintain. You're making, say, copper, and copper is up and down, and when copper is down, they're probably not going to spend it on that trommel. But if copper's up, they will. So a lot of it has to do with the price of the product you're screening.
Right.
And then over the years, there's still a lot of metal mines out there that have been operating for 40, 50 years, and they have old mills. I mean,
it's so wild when you see those. Some of them are
and they're so small.
And they're small. Yeah. They're very small.
Yep.
And so there are limitations as to how small we can make something in a round situation.
Right.
Whereas those really tight circles are very hard to come by.
Right. Okay. Who's the distribution model? Do you have people that are also like selling it for you? How do you partner up with everybody? What's sort of just the business model across the board? Is it all direct? You said it's OEMs and direct. Is it also engineering firms? You partner with them? What are sort of those different ways you get involved in these projects?
We go to market through sales agents and dealers, okay, throughout Canada. I cover Eastern Canada, okay, that would be Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. But within Ontario and Quebec, we have a dealer network that's established. And I work with them. They are local to each one of the mines, so they have their contacts for selling other products into those operations.
Right.
And we've had long-standing relationships with many of them. But in certain regions of Canada, we go direct. All right, we don't have representation in that area, so I come up and travel to those regions, Newfoundland and Labrador, and so forth. That is direct with Polydeck.
And that's always been that way, or is that evolved over the years?
Really a better way of looking at it is, what is the distance between making call A and call B?
That's correct.
And if it's a long distance, you probably can't have one man of your own paying him out of your own pocket to go there.
Yeah.
And if he can go to numerous ones, then yes, that's possible. And so you work on an economy of scale, and that's basically how it comes out. There are places in, for instance, southwestern United States where we have our own people that go to the mines, and we have our own
sort of these like hubs where there's multiple mines and all that sort of thing.
But always, we want to please the customer. Whatever the customer needs, we want to provide that. And so in this particular area that he's speaking of, we've done it with agents. It might be someplace where we can do it direct ourselves. It might be somewhere, it just each situation is a little bit different based upon how many other mines or how many people are doing the same thing within a geographical area. And we're flexible enough as a family-owned company to be able to do those things. We're not stuck with.
Oh, is it still a family-owned company?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
And we're not stuck with a corporate structure that only says you can do it this way.
Okay.
Right.
And we try and adapt.
So even over the growth over the years, you've been able to maintain. How do you actually? How do you manage that systems in place while maintaining that flexibility? Not an easy thing to do, is it, for a larger company?
No. I mean, we listen to our customers. I mean, that is one of our strong points. We try to understand every aspect of the problem that they present, and then we will design. And we actually, if we can't solve the problem, we will direct them to someone who can.
Yeah, you will.
Okay, that's out of our expertise.
And that's coming right from the top to have that approach.
That's exactly right. But I mean, I would say we're 95% successful if we fully understand what the problem is to meet their needs.
It's even higher than that, to be honest with you. And a lot of it comes from being a small family operated company and growing.
Right.
When I started with the company, we were very good in one small market. And as we expanded into the markets, there were things that we didn't do very well. So we had to learn to do those better. And you learn by making mistakes. So we made enough mistakes that we started doing it right. And the key thing is to document what you do right and what you do wrong, and try not to do the things wrong again.
Yeah.
And try and do everything right.
More right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just over time. I wanted to ask you before I let you go. It's maybe it's not completely on the mining thing, but what about the recycling? I know that part has been that recycling industry has obviously just boomed and boomed over the years and just going to keep getting bigger. Where do you sort of land in that space and what applications?
Well, I'll give you an example. One of my largest customers in the States, they scrap cars, residential waste and so forth. They put in wet processing systems with vibratory screen, use our panels. Okay.
So what are they running across the screen?
They're crushed, shredded automobiles.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And they have other dry systems within the plant. And I don't pretend to know all the aspects of it. But on the wet systems, they use similar mining equipment as hydrocyclones and things of that nature. And then they use vibratory screens to make separations to recover some of the platinum group metals, copper, gold.
Wow.
I even saw a dicer table in operation.
So it's a full process.
It's a full process. And they're
that must be something to see.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And so you go to any of these operations and so forth, there's trucks lined up around city blocks to bring in waste, and they're recovering the steel. They're recovering all these items for use. Speaking to sustainability, that's the buzzword today. And one thing that Polydeck does, we recycle about roughly 96% of our scrap, whether it be steel, polyurethane, or rubber, in our processes for making new panels.
You said 96%?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Now, one of the interesting things about polyurethanes are there's some that you can't reuse. And ours happens to be one that you can.
Yeah.
So it makes us much more earth friendly.
That's right.
Much more earth friendly.
Right. What happens to the other 4%?
Well, we've dramatically reduced landfill waste.
Right.
by
Okay.
doing that.
Yeah. No, I'm
And we're
completely
doing our
kidding.
very best to make sure those people don't have the business.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are circumstances where it's really important, though, chemically, that you have a wear material that is non-recyclable. And in those cases, you don't really have a choice. But the beauty of our company is we have research and development people who are constantly addressing these situations. And we're trying to be environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
Mining doesn't have a really good track record as being environmentally friendly, but we are trying to do that.
Yeah. And there's a big shift in it, too. I've said quite a few times on the show now, even from 4 years ago, the conversations I had, not in front of the camera, not these, because obviously everybody's on their best behavior, but the private conversations, because I get all kinds of conversations I have off camera from doing this show, and just people's approach, the way they think about the environment, it has shifted. It's not the same way. People within the industry, people like me, don't want to come out and pump something that's shouldn't be out there.
And without losing that, safety is extremely important. And that is one of the things we take to heart. And really maintaining a modular system, number one, is much easier. One man can easily do any of the work. It doesn't take a team of people and a lot of
not as many moving parts and all the.
And your back lifting something.
But then if you're using a urethane product that won't catch fire, and everybody seems to be torching and doing things in a mill or a processing facility. That's helpful also.
Yeah.
So we are doing our very best to be safe, to recycle, and to provide sustainable and reliable equipment. We're doing our very best to provide these people with the highest production per square foot that they can get in any kind of screening media, and at the same time make it systematically modular where we can do whatever we need to make the system work better.
I'm going to ask one last question. I'm going to give it to both of you. John, how long have you been with the company?
I've been with the company going on 9 years.
9 years.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was hoping you'd say something like that. So my question is, family company, where do you think that, and I ask this, very select people who come on the show, I ask this. Fortunately, I get to ask it quite a bit because there's some great companies out there. But there is some companies that just, you can tell from the moment you sit down with them, they care about the clients. That can only come from the top. That's the only place. Because if a leader says something bad about a client, you will watch the next hour. You will find every horrible thing anybody ever has felt about a client just like that.
That's right.
So it comes from the top. Where do you think that comes from, being with the company much longer? And then what's your perspective on it with the 9 years? So we'll start with you.
Well, realistically, it comes from caring. A family organization definitely cares more. They are closer to the end user and what's being done. But quite frankly, it goes beyond that. We have a full caring committee at our facility. We have our own chaplain at our facility. We do a lot of things for the people in our community. We do a lot of things for the people in the mining world where we work.
So you make the company actually has to look outward outside themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And everybody has a card. And on the back of that card, it has, what our beliefs are and how committed we are to those.
Wow.
Right.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I used to work for an OEM before I came on board with Polydeck, and we used their product. And I'll just give you an example. Many years while I was running this other company, I used to tell my wife, I said, I'd love to work for them someday because I admire the family and the friendship that I cultivated with Peter Freisler during my tenure at this other manufacturing firm. And when the opportunity presented itself, I sent my resume. All right. And I came on board. There's no other organization I've ever worked for in my career that has more of a focus on caring for others and the Christian values that they carry. And truly, it's not a tagline. It's not more. It's real every day as far as our communities that we work in and that we serve. Polydeck and the Freisler family they're exemplary. I'm just happy to be able to serve working for them to this day.
Well, I certainly won't be able to add anything better than that. That's a great place to end it. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. You get these sort of special moments where guests come on at the end of the show. So I want to thank both gentlemen, John and Perry, for being on the show today. We will see you on the next episode of Mining Now.